Welcome to the Red Bean Podcast. My name is Mr. Toad.
And I'm Dr. Frog.
We're going to be talking about a show called Trigun.
Because two guns weren't enough, you need a try in there.
You can never stop trying in Trigun.
Try hard.
Try hard not to kill anybody.
This is a pacifist's dream, isn't it? This is an older anime from 98.
Yes.
And you asked me originally if I'd seen it before. And I did in the original release. I saw an episode or two when it first came out in 1998. In English, at least. And the thing is, I didn't think it could hold a candle to Spike Spiegel and Cowboy Bebop. So when I was first introduced to Vash the Stampede and his personality, I kind of dismissed it. Little did I know that at how sensational it would become.
One of the things that I enjoy about Trigun, and I've been a fan of it for years, is this kind of upbeat personality despite how crummy the situation around them is. I think if the audience is not familiar with Vash the Stampede or Trigun, kind of think of like Mad Max Western, a dystopian.
I love the grittiness, and maybe there's a little bit of lack of grittiness in the personality to match the scenery.
See,
so you had the grittiness of the environment and the world.
But that's what makes Vash the Stampede like such an uplifting force, because normally if you're going to be in a dystopian Mad Max kind of world, it's going to be, people dying, people getting shot. Yeah. I mean, in our last episode, we saw that an entire group of people had just gotten massacred.
Well, it seems like every episode, wherever he goes, there's always a massacre. And, there's a lot of using others' forces against themselves. Having enemies accidentally free whoever they kidnapped, or accidentally shooting, or disabling their own weapons or something. Not through the use of force, but through the use of the other person's power.
What did you think of that aspect where Vash Stampede stuck gum into the guy's gun?
It was
just
very
in case.
Subtle, because he was blowing it. And even the subtle stuff where you think he's just being an idiot blowing bubble gum, I guess has a purpose.
It kind of reminds me of Columbo. You never watch Columbo where he's like...
Viktor Frankl in the 80s? Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite shows, along with Rumple of the Bailey is a British show in the 70s, similar. But go ahead.
What I love about it is that you kind of think of this main character being like, oh, he's a buffoon, he doesn't know what he's doing. But then it turns out he's not that foolish. He's like it's like a 4D chess. I feel like he's ahead of everybody, and he's kind of anticipating.
I think that was his first role. He was 40 years old, and he wasn't the original person they were seeking for that role. And he has this... just one more question.
Yeah.
Just one more question, And then there's always something small, like, if you said you were out at the boat, then why would you leave the study light on? I mean, I just can't imagine why someone would leave the light on if they were going out to the boat. And you're just like, what? Like, he had mind, whatever he did.
You get hooked.
Yeah, it was, after watching Peter Falk's Columbo, it's what I call a reverse mystery, where they show you the murder in the first few minutes. And then your thought is, wow, this looks like the perfect crime. How's it going to get solved? And there's a little bit of Sherlock Holmes in it, a little inspiration I could tell. Because Sherlock Holmes always happened to turn over the right note at the right time. Or, there's always a little bit of like, oh, you were around and noticed that the phone call came in,
Observation.
And it's observation, but it's always like, I noticed the one thing in the one way that that could be found out.
I love that with Sherlock Holmes about how he would analyze people's shoes and be like, oh, you work at the factory.
You work at the factory, yeah, exactly.
And you're like, how did you know I worked at the factory? He's like, on the side of your shoe you have some metal shavings.
Well, honestly, I don't know if you're familiar, as an anime fan, you probably should be, with Danganronpa.
Okay.
Which translates to bullet time or something. Like bullet happy or something.
I know.
The thing is, No, I missed the translation on that, by the way. I forget what it stands for. One is like bullet, though. But anyway, but it's basically a murder mystery. There's a murder that happens, and then there's a case. And it's just a series of murder mysteries, but basically you have to figure out, and there's a logic setting on the game. You can set it to hard logic or easy logic. And depending on the evidence that you get, you have to figure out who done it.
Yeah.
And it's always small stuff like, oh, there's a little bit of hair that was left on the counter or something.
Or what's people's motivation, you know?
Yeah. Well,
what's the motivation for people to go after Vash the Stampede?
Well, so the one thing that hooked me with Vash the Stampede, and why when I was a kid I cared more about, can I relate to the main character, which I see Vash as acting erratic sometimes. He'll go, oh yes, I'm here to save the day, ha ha ha. He'll change his voice and his mannerisms, and I thought, well, this guy's inconsistent. I didn't really connect with him as a character. But one thing he does have going for him is that mystery.
Yeah.
There's unanswered questions. I still don't know, why doesn't he fire his gun? Why does he feel like he has to save humans? He always feels the need to step in.
And to give the audience a perspective, we've only watched about 4 episodes.
I'm only 4 episodes in, and I'm really enjoying it.
And we're going to watch more of these, and we're going to get the rest. This is the first part 1 of our Trigun reaction.
Yeah, and you're an expert about it. This is my first time encountering it. I think I saw 1 episode when I was a kid, and I was like, this guy's goofy. He's not cool like Spike Spiegel. It came out around the same time as Bebop.
What I like about Trigun is that in the beginning, you kind of think of it as like a silly story of this guy hopping around to a point where it's like we don't even know who the real Vash is for a little while.
Well, I still feel that way, and usually I could see my younger self not being interested. But even with that, I know it's one of the top animes on everyone's list. It's definitely a classic, and I do love the 90s style, hand-drawn. There's some fun characters in there as well. One is Meryl. That's my snake impression of Meryl, or Pliskin, if you will. But yeah, so you have some interesting characters there. One's Meryl, and she has a sidekick as well. They work for the insurance company. It's such a funny concept to think of, in the Wild West setting, you have this insurance company that's going around after all the, what's the name on there? I can't read it, but...
Yeah, Millie and Meryl.
Millie is Meryl's partner.
Little sidekick or something.
Sidekick, yeah, but basically, you don't expect something like an insurance company in a Wild West show. So the humor is subtle, and I'm tickled by some of the characters that I've met so far.
What I like about it is this idea that, at least for insurance, this kind of brings me back to this whole perspective of when we watch these superhero movies, these people are destroying cities, Superman's flying through a building.
Oh, yeah. Very action-oriented.
Exactly. Someone shoots a rocket and blows. And I keep thinking to myself, how do we pay for the damages after the aftermath?
Well,
and the concept of we need to find Vash the Stampede and maybe stop him from blowing up a city, that'll save us a ton of money for our insurance companies. It makes sense.
In Gotham, the insurance must be ridiculous.
Yeah.
You're going to have to redo the windows. If you're in construction, you got job security for life.
Metropolis is just such a mess.
It actually reminds me of the Clerks section.
Oh, the Death Star.
Yeah. I mean, the first one we understand. You blow it up. It's fully operational. It was going to destroy, not Endor. The first one was Leia's home, Alderaan.
Yeah.
The Alderaan system, right? So, so basically, though, with the reconstructed Death Star, the argument is it's not fully operational. You don't see a lot of units on it. It's mostly construction workers and contract workers.
It's like plumbers, electricians, iron workers.
Are you really glad that the rebels, who are kind of like terrorists at this point,
they're basically a communist group that's like...
They're basically terrorists that are blowing up the government facility that's being built, destroying all those subcontractors who have families they need to feed.
What I do like about that aspect of it with the clerks, and they were talking about it, was this guy was like, hey, I'm a carpenter. And I know if I was on that work site, I would look at the money, but you know what you do? You don't look at the money, you look at the heart.
You look at the heart. Yeah, I remember that. He's
The
like,
heart.
look, it's their fault for taking the money.
It's their fault to take the money. Because he talked.
There's some jobs you pass up, even if.
Because he was saying something like, "Oh man, I had a job up north or something, and this one guy, he was a criminal. He was a part of the mob. He was going to pay me a good amount of money, but I kept thinking to myself, do I really want to work on a house where the guy who owns the home is a criminal, and I could end up getting caught up in some type of like gang war violence or something?"
Yeah, no. So actually, yeah, he considered that. So I mean, there's also the argument that the Empire did nothing wrong. They were trying to build a unified law and order to the universe
to keep those rebels under control.
Yeah, there we go.
See, that's the thing about what I think about is interesting about Trigun is that he's wanting to deliver justice without the act of killing.
Well, and there's a little bit of like karma as a theme in the first few episodes, and one might be. I don't know what his past is. Maybe he did something bad, but now he's trying to maybe rectify, is my guess.
See, I'm
he's
curious.
trying to be good and save humans. I don't know why. But here's the thing, though. Karma in the micro sense, not just that macro sense of the story, is also that the people who are acting poorly through their own force, through their own guns and their own energy, end up either disabling themselves or, they shoot a bullet that ends up ricocheting and freeing the victim anyway. So the whole idea is that even if there's this bad energy, it ends up being balanced out with good.
See, that's the thing that I love about Vash in the sense that he's kind of like the voice of reason, but he's also the voice of, like, silliness at the same time. And I kind of see that as a way of dealing with maybe extreme violence or maybe when you deal with extreme hardship, maybe when you deal with these things, maybe you could deal with some humor. I mean, I think you saw a book on my kitchen table, Man Searches for Meaning.
Oh, by Viktor Frankl. Yes, that's a classic. It definitely, I found it profound. And my main takeaway from Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning is that we all get to choose the attitude that we bring to life. No matter what the circumstances are.
We can't choose what's around us and what's happening around us.
We can choose how we respond.
We can choose how we respond.
Yeah.
And I think in this series with Trigun, Vash the Stampede saying, hey, I might be living in Mad Max world, but if I can still maintain a good attitude, and these two ladies want to seem to take care of me.
Well, they think fondly of him a little bit. They argue about whether he's a good person or not. So you have Millie,
or he's even the real guy.
Great. And then you have Meryl.
To
do my snake impression again.
Meryl.
Instead of Marley, right? No, but Meryl. But with Meryl, who's not a Pokemon, in fact. Sounds like a Pokemon name, though. But for actually, Meryl does sound like a Pokemon, doesn't it? But she's for some reason always angry at him, and I'm not sure why.
I kind of just want to say, I choose you.
Well, I'm not sure why she's always angry at him.
You see,
every episode, and maybe I'm not supposed to watch them back to back. It's supposed to be like every week. Yeah.
Well, the thing here is once you start getting into the show and you get deeper into it, and you start to really figure out like what is his past.
Is she a tsundere, or does she really not like him? Because she says she doesn't like him, but then she does this like pouty face tsundere thing.
I think people do this thing where if they don't like somebody, they'll treat them differently.
Sometimes like aggressively.
Negatively,
you're not like me. You're not on my wavelength. Yeah.
But they kind of still like you, though.
Well, you haven't done anything wrong. He hasn't done anything wrong. And that's what Millie points out. I like Millie's openness. She's like, hey, and just takes things on face value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Meryl, the other one,
she's very contemplative and analyzing things and very structured. This isn't the way people are supposed to act. You can't be Vash. Vash, in my mind, is this particular thing.
He's 7 feet tall. He has a mohawk, and he's a womanizer. And they're all like, "Oh my gosh, he's a womanizer."
It sounds like a gun, right? if you shoot someone with it.
Exactly. It's the ultimate peacemaker. Actually, it's the chaos maker.
Or peacemaker.
We'll call it the chaos maker.
Piece of chaos.
Peacemaker means everything's quiet. I think if everyone was turned into a woman,
Peacemaker would be a really cool nickname for a gun.
It was a gun.
The Peacemaker.
It is a peacemaker. It was, I think, it was made by Colt.
Now, let me know if I'm wrong. One detail I noticed in the first 4 episodes, and I'm not sure if it comes up later. in the first episode, he got one bullet back and put it in his gun, I think. Is it true that the last 4 episodes I've watched, he's just been carrying around one bullet in his gun?
He uses bullets sparingly.
Is there something significant about that, or am I reading too much into it?
No, you're not looking into it too much. Maybe a little bit, but
have one bullet that he's gotten back.
He uses the bullets sparingly, and
not to get too dark, because I hear the show does get dark. Is that bullet theoretically for him?
He doesn't believe in suicide. That was one thing he says in the 4th episode.
I'm wondering, he does this like sometimes he'll say things that are kind of dark, but then it goes back to being goofy.
Yeah, because what it is his life experience, and that's one of the things is once we get further into the show and you start to see his past, you get to see how the challenges he's faced and some of the wrongs that he's seen. But one thing I would say about Vash Stampede is he values life. He considers life sacred, and I consider it to such a degree that he even tries to talk to his enemies in a way where he's like, do you really want to do what you're doing?
Yeah. And, I found out what his personality reminds me most of. Are you familiar with Rintaro Okabe?
No, I'm not.
Otherwise known as the mad scientist Hoin Kyoma. This is the main character of a show called Steins from 2011.
Oh,
it deals with time travel really well, but the character always seems to have a split personality that he changes. And half of the show, or maybe more than half of the show, most of the show, you're probably wondering, is what he's saying, is he insane and delusional and schizophrenic? Or are his descriptions of reality accurate? Is there an organization after him, or is it just in his mind? Is time travel real, or is he just crazy?
Is it through excitement that he tells his story, or is it just presented in a way where it's very haphazard?
What happens is he'll say serious things, but then he'll change his personality and laugh it off and pretend like it's nothing. So it reminds me of Vash the Stampede in terms of like, if he gets serious, he can also be like, "Whoa, I'm here to save the day, lady," and then he goes into like, a whinier thing. He seems to change personality the same way Okabe changes.
I think the reason he does that, and you'll see further into the show, this is a coping mechanism. I really believe.
Same thing with
for Stein.
Rintaro Okabe or Hoin Kyoma. Which, by the way, I haven't seen that show in like 6 or 7 years, so I'm really glad that I can pull out the full name of the character and his pseudonym and his secret name.
Wow.
Anyway, I just want to say, first 4 episodes in, I'm seeing some similarities. Maybe they were fans of Trigun when they came up with the Steins character.
What's one of the
things? If you like Trigun, you'd probably like that.
I got to check it out. What's your impression in the last 4 episodes for a newcomer coming into Trigun?
This is fun. It's just overall fun. If you like westerns, if you like old-fashioned, I think there's been a kidnapping every single episode. So it's old-fashioned western. You can rob the bank, run away with the banknotes. You can kidnap someone and hold them for ransom. You can steal the town's water supply and get away. It's old-fashioned villainy, and there's this niceness. It reminds me of the old, westerns with, Irina Morricone music in the background, and the OST for this I really am interested in watching. But this reminds me of like Good, Bad, and the Ugly, A Fistful of Dollars. A lot of those old westerns, a lot of tropes from them.
It also
has a lot of fun, family-friendly, I'd say. There's not as much death as I would have expected.
It also has like a little steampunk, right?
Is it 13 up or 14 up? I don't think this is a Y7. This has got to be a teen. A Y11 maybe.
Yeah, I think this is definitely
it's probably not
a teenager.
It's probably 13, 14. It's probably not Y11. But yeah, I mean, this is family friendly. You mentioned something else. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Sorry. I basically was saying that one of the elements too is that not only is this a Western, this is also kind of like a steampunk.
I noticed that there's a little bit of crossing genres there.
So if someone's into steampunk, you might really like
that with the metal carriage that came up. I expected a horse-drawn carriage, but they came up in basically a tank that you would have expected from Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind.
Yeah, and you see an advanced radio.
Steampunk in that too.
With a radio. But it's also weird because you have this advanced radio, but then you also have record players.
Well, the wobbly record I think was a good touch.
Yeah.
I actually played the music off when they came in to indicate the wobbly record. That shows some good alignment between the sound design and the artist.
So from a scale from 1 not being interested and 10 being very interested, so far, first 4 episodes, what grade would you give it, Dr. Frog?
I would give it, because of who I am now and not 1998, I'm going to give it a 9.
There you go. I'm definitely going to give it a 9 as well. It's a show that it's close to my heart in the sense that
it can go up. It can be one of my favorites if it's done well.
Once you get to the end, once you get to that, you really figure out what the whole story's about. But one of the things I like about Japanese and anime is that they have this way of telling a story that's very unconventional from a Western's perspective.
What I love is they don't need to use language. They don't need to fill it up with dialogue, and they can show rather than tell. So they take time on their settings. You might have the opening to an anime be first a setting shot of the mountains with a small house. Then the next 5-second shot could be a zoomed in one where you see the house and a tree. And then you see someone in the window. And then the next shot could be you see someone, it's just outside the window of the house, but you see someone talking inside. And then the next shot, the 5th or 6th shot of this now 30-second setting shot, is now the person talking inside the house. In a lot of Western media, what I notice is they jump not just into the conversation, but you're in the room immediately in a completely different location. So it'll cut from, being inside one complete location with one dialogue or action to somewhere else in the world where there's another dialogue and action happening. But it focuses on the action more than the world. See,
one of the things that I do like about anime, and this is something that I don't notice animes do this very often, but Westerns do. I feel like in the Western perspective, we like to grab someone's head and shove them into the cake. But in anime, they're kind of like, look at this cake. Here's a spoon. And then you take a little taste, and you're like, oh, that's really good. You
appreciate it more.
And then it's
the same cake, yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, I want to modify what I said. Some Western media, like Deer Hunter from the early 70s with Christopher Walken.
Oh, yeah. Great movie.
That had wonderful setting shots, as well as 2001: A Space Odyssey, which didn't have dialogue for the first 48 minutes of the film. But there were a lot of setting shots, and they told the story through showing. But yeah, I think that you gave a great example. You're supposed to enjoy the cake, not
like cram your head into it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I feel like you have this aspect in these movies and these stories where they'll have I think Michael Bay's famous for it, and what's his name?
The early Looney Tunes.
Yeah.
The early Looney Tunes, you'll notice when they fall from a cliff, it falls a long time, and there's no sound, but you just see a poof at the bottom.
No, sometimes you go.
It fades. But then, or sometimes the really old ones don't make a sound at all. It just shows the poof because it's so far away. The newer ones, boing,
yeah.
They have these big explosions and the camera shakes, even though you're however many miles up the cliff looking down at it.
Those,
but it's an example of a Michael Bay thing. They make the explosion very
super showy.
Yeah, and
really explosive.
When really, it shouldn't be about the explosion. It should be about how does the explosion advance the narrative. And oftentimes they don't. We're just like, I know my mom was this way with action movies. She just wants to see the car explode and do a cool flip. It's like popcorn or something. Butter. We put lots of butter on the popcorn. Yes, give me more.
I think it's also the other fact is I'm going to say it, and when I mention it, you're going to see it every time.
Uh-oh.
What it is that in a lot of these action movies, you'll have this one point where the one guy will be like, oh, this is why we're doing X, Y, Z, and G, and H. And they just tell you the whole plot. And then they do the action stuff.
Like a trailer.
It's like in the middle of the movie, they're like, okay, now we have to just tell the whole audience. But what I like about, at least through Vash the Stampede, on the 4th episode we just watched, we started that episode looking at a cemetery outside of a town.
Well, it told the story. So later, when you found out, the motivations behind people related to the massive
deaths,
it puts it in perspective. So that, for me, that's consistent world building.
See,
they could have easily just thrown that as a throwaway line and not set up the scene, but instead they dropped him off and they had him walk into town, which also has justification for why he did it that relates to his character. Instead of being driven all the way into town.
Because what I like about it is that we're not being told what's happening, but we're being given just enough information for us to be curious about how does that relate to the story.
Respects the intelligence of the audience, is the way that I put it.
Yeah.
Anime respects the intelligence of the audience. They don't need to spell things out for everyone.
And well, in that case, we're going to start wrapping up.
It's been a good one.
I enjoy it, and I look forward to our part 2 and kind of seeing your perspective on the next 4 episodes to kind of see what you think about Vash the Stampede.
In bits and chunks.
Yeah, and I think this is a good way to get the audience interested in maybe checking out this anime. I, for one, give it a 9 so far, and you're giving it a 9?
9 so far, yeah. And it can go up, it can also go down.
That's a possibility, that's for sure.
Depends on if he pulls the trigger finally. He put us all out of our misery.
Or he eats donuts.
He does like donuts, and I'm confounded how there's the ability to make donuts in that kind of setting. You're
growing wheat.
You're struggling for water, yet you always have a box.
I know, it's like a giant desert plain. It's Mad Max.
I mean, if there's Johnny Appleseed, some apples I can understand. If it's like, apples are a delicacy.
Yeah, water seems like a major scarcity in this world. And we'll find out in future episodes how scarce that really is. I'm not going to ruin it for you, but I'm going to give it back to the audience. And we just want to wrap up this episode. Thank you for listening to the Red Bean Podcast. This is Mr. Toad.
This is Dr. Frog.
And you guys have a wonderful day. We'll see you soon.
Take care.